So you deploy an AI workflow for your client. It's running right now, but is it working? Is it costing $50 or $500 this month? Are prompts failing? You have no idea, do you? Well, that's a problem, friend. Observability and maintenance made me a small fortune in my years consulting for Fortune 500 and 100 companies. And for some reason, no one talks about it on YouTube. In this video, I'm going to show you how easily you can set up some monitoring for your clients and the workflows that you build so that you can charge a premium for your consulting services. So let's get into it. So before we get into the practical stuff, I need to set the scene with a few slides. Now, if you're trying to separate yourself from just being a tool peddler or something like that and present yourself more as a consultant or a transformation partner, you really need to adopt the language and the perspective of when you're approaching these clients. Because the one view is just to go in there and sell something to them. But the other view is to look at the entire business and see what pieces are missing, because those pieces are opportunities for you to upsell different things to them. Now, if you haven't watched it already, I would watch my video on maintenance where I talk about the entire model and how there is so much more money to be made in cleaning up other people's mess than going in the first time and just building them a tool or something. But for this video, we're going to focus on observability specifically. So if I'm going to a new client side, one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the person, who's going to take care of this when I'm gone? And you'd be surprised how many people are going to stare at you blankly. They'll look at you and think, I thought this thing would be self-repairing. Doesn't it take care of itself? Stuff like that. They would sit there and think, having not ever thought about the fact that maybe they need someone technical to take care of this. And it's a huge problem on YouTube at the moment because everyone is talking about, I built this 10K workflow, I did this, I did that. Cool, but what did you leave the client with? And if you don't leave the client with something good, that means you're probably going to get a bad rep if the product ends up breaking down the line, especially because a lot of people don't consider security, evaluation, and all the really technical stuff that goes into this. And what this question actually does is it reveals two scenarios. So the first one is that they have no one. They have no internal team. They have no one to monitor this, maintain it, or troubleshoot it. They don't even know what maintenance means in the AI context. So your opportunity here is you can either train someone internally to do this thing, or afterwards you can manage it via a retainer model. The second scenario is that people might think about it, but they still might not care about it. And they think, cool, testing was perfect, so we don't really need to worry about this because we tested this. But the problem here is that as soon as you move something away from the dev environment, production is an entirely different beast. Sure, you could have done your evals and all of that stuff beforehand, but a lot of the time what happens in production is the data might change. Someone makes a change and doesn't tell anyone, and then the data changes as a result of that. A software update changes the system, and the whole thing changes. And you'd be surprised how often that happens, especially in large organizations, because there can be a lot of mismatch between what's happening on the one end of the system towards the other side, which is quite a few steps before we even get there. So this causes a lot of problems because obviously their costs can go up, the data is irrelevant, in which case the system becomes almost unusable, amongst a whole bunch of other problems that we're going to get into soon. So without observability, you have a pretty strange problem because you have clients calling you saying, why is this not working? Why has this changed? Our system is no longer doing what you said it would do. We want our money back. You should fix this for free, blah, blah, blah. If you didn't set the expectation up front. Now, if you did set the expectation up front, you see these issues in real time. You can catch these problems before they happen. But more importantly, you can make yourself more money from the exact same engagement just by doing something very simple. And like I said in my other videos, it's much easier to upsell for an existing client than it is to keep finding new clients over and over again. So the reality here is that clients don't really care about observability as a concept, but they do care about wasting money. They do care about if their system is breaking or not working or not doing what you said it would deliver. And they definitely care if their costs suddenly triple overnight. So you need observability, not just to protect them and make sure that they're getting their ROI, but also to protect you as a consultant, your image, your name, your business. Everything is attached to whatever you build. And if this stuff starts breaking down the line because you didn't think about the architecture up front, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And the beautiful thing here is that when you're looking at observability, because it's part of the larger architecture picture, it creates two revenue paths for you. The first one being is that you get the internal handoff with training. Now, what I would do if I was approaching a client site, I'd go to them, I'd ask that upfront question, who's going to take care of this when I'm gone? And if they couldn't tell me anyone, then I would offer them these two solutions. The first one, I can train someone in your team, I'll guide them through the system, I'll leave them with standard operating procedures, troubleshooting guides, a video guide, something like that, and I'll walk them through the system step by step before I leave. And then I would bake a one-time fee into that, plus the documentation, whatever. The second option is to have a retainer model, which is amazing if you do this for a whole bunch of clients, because you can stack it up and then obviously you have recurring revenue. Now, the awesome thing with this is that you can have different training models for each month. So it wouldn't just be like, cool, I'm going to train your team on this system I built today once, and then I'm going to keep doing that month after month. That wouldn't make sense. So you would do 1 month the initial build, and then you would need to find out new avenues for how to train their team. But that's new opportunities to grow, because the more time you spend on site with these people, the more problems you learn about, which means more opportunities for you to upsell. So if I had to choose any of these models, obviously I'm going to choose the retainer model, because it means I can constantly climb this ladder of upselling to solve existing problems within the environment. And then finally on the slide front, you can obviously see the monetary benefit of this, but you need to understand that observability isn't just about having some fancy dashboard that maybe someone's going to look at. It's about having the data to answer specific questions that if you don't have an answer to, you're going to really lose credibility. So the first one is this thing working, which literally correlates to the success rate of whatever it is that you're doing. The second is, what is this costing? People need to know that stuff, and you need to know that the costs aren't drifting because you didn't cater for something. And then finally, can we make this better? Which is the optimization route that, again, if you have a retainer model, means you can upsell via the optimization, whether it's cost, performance, user adoption, whatever it is that you're doing. And so now that you understand this stuff, we can take a look at the practical environment. So what we're going to do here is we're going to jump across to my agentic workflow. We're going to use a tool called Helicone, and we're going to connect it to my sales outreach tool so that we can get some metrics on what actually happens when my tool runs. So let's jump in. Cool. So here we are at my Helicone dashboard. Now there are a bunch of tools that you can use for observability with AI at the moment. One of which is Helicone. The other is something called Portkey, and another one which is called Braintrust. Now each of these do slightly different things and they have slightly different purposes. For the main part, this one's mostly for evaluations and iterations. If you don't know what those are, I'll cover them in another video. Portkey, I would say, is for much larger clients, and it has a whole bunch of other things that you can use, like guardrails and all of that attached in it. But for simplicity's sake, what I like to use a lot of the time is Helicone. There's a great free tier on all of these options, but Helicone is super simple to implement in your workflow, as you'll soon find out. And for the most part, for a lot of people building for their clients at the moment, something like this is going to be perfect for them, because of that free tier, but also it solves a very simple problem at the moment, and that's showing us an overview of what's going on in the environment. Obviously, the larger the client and the more complexity behind whatever you're doing, a different solution might be a better choice for them. But for the most part, we're going to go with this today. So like I said, it's free to get this thing. Once you've signed up, pretty sure you all know how to do that. There'll actually be a little quick start guide on the left-hand panel here, and it will guide you through what you need to do. But essentially, at a very high level, the way that this thing works is it embeds itself into your workflow by routing all of your data through its own API into OpenAI or Claude, whatever it is that you're using. So the data traverses through Helicone, and then it goes into OpenAI to perform its actions. And that's how it gets all of these shiny numbers over here. So a caveat on that is, if you are building for clients, they need to understand that their data won't just be going through OpenAI stuff, it will also be going through whatever option you choose for the observability feature. Obviously, you need to do your homework before you do this to make sure that they are SOC compliant and all of the other good stuff to make sure the data is protected. But your clients still need to be aware of that before you're doing it. Anyway, enough of the fun police stuff. So after you've run through their quick setup guide, you should have all the stuff that you need. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to show you what it would be. So I would go into API keys, and here would be my quick start token. So when you generate this, they'll give it to you, and then you'll be able to copy that and paste it into any of your workflows, which I'll show you soon. And then the second part of this is to come on down to providers. Now this is going to be where you get keys for every single one of the providers that you're actually doing. For instance, I'm using OpenAI. So you can see I've got my key ID here. Anthropic, I use that a lot as well. My Perplexity one is in here. They also have OpenRouter, which is great, and a whole bunch of other things as well. But for the sake of this demo, we're just going to stick with OpenAI because it's actually part of my workflow that we're going to be testing. So once you've added your account details in here and you've grabbed your API key from the quick start guide that you set up, it's super simple to get this implemented. You just need to come into your end-to-end workflow, and every single node that has a respective LLM, you need to just replace this credential over here with the Helicone credentials that you created. So if you don't have these created, you would just go into your credential store in end-to-end, add the key from your Helicone workflow, put it in there, save it, and then replace OpenAI account, your original one, with OpenAI account 2, which is the new one that flows through Helicone. And that's it. It really is that straightforward when it comes down to N8N. But if you've seen some of my newer videos, you'll know that I'm not really using N8N anymore. I've kind of migrated to the agentic approach where I've rebuilt everything I did in N8N in the agentic workflows. So to showcase this, why don't we have a look at how easily we can do this in an agentic workflow, just for the sake of doing it in this video so you can see some fresh stuff coming into our observability dashboard. Okay, so I've grabbed my API key from the Helicone dashboard, and I'm just going to talk to my agent and get it to set up some routing for us. So let's have a quick chat. I want to set up some observability in our sales workflow. I'm going to paste in my API key for Helicone. Please research anything you need to in order to get Helicone to work in our environment for the Perplexity and OpenAI models. Okay, so now it's going to go away and do its thing. I don't really care that I'm showing my API keys because I'm going to delete it straight after this video. But for the most part, it should now go away and do what I need it to do. Pretty straightforward here. It should read the documentation and then figure out that every single OpenAI node actually needs to have this API key to route its data through. The interesting thing with Perplexity is that if you're doing it in n8n, you can't simply just do the credential store option, at least at the time of me recording this video. So it's going to be interesting to see how it implements it for Perplexity. But for the most part, this thing hasn't failed me yet. So here it's got its steps: add Helicone API key to our environment variables, good stuff. Update Perplexity employee to route through Helicone proxy, that's exactly what we want. And the same for OpenAI. So it read the online documentation, figure out what it needed to do, and now it's doing this. One thing to note about my system, worst practice is to store all of your credentials in plain text in a .env file. So if you're doing something in production, obviously for your clients, if you are using my workflow, make sure you do not store credentials in the .env. So it's now running away and it should route everything pretty soon. And here you can see it's already done, apparently. Yes, and don't ask me again. Helicone Observability is now integrated into your sales workflow. Let me verify that setup. So it's going to go away and do something, but I imagine this isn't going to work the first time. If it does, that would be amazing. So changes made, added Helicone API key, blah, 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 updated Perplexity employee and my OpenAI employee. That's exactly what we want. And what we get is request logging, cost monitoring, all of the good stuff that we're going to cover in our dashboard after we do a test run. Okay, cool. Let's test this in real time. I'm going to paste in my LinkedIn profile, start the research from the beginning of the chain and run all the way through. I want to track each model to see how much it's going to cost. Cool. Now it's going to run through each of my workflow steps. For those of you not familiar with it, essentially it starts with some LinkedIn scraping. Then it goes into the Perplexity module that researches the company, the data, any intent signals that it can find. And then it goes through a whole bunch of different layers of DM sequencing, figuring out who the person is that we're reaching out to so that we can understand exactly how to approach them all automatically. You can check out that video on the screen now. I give a full walkthrough of that and I give you the backbone of how you can install it yourself. And here we go. It's running along. My little builder. Perfect. Let's run a full research chain on your profile and track everything through Helicone. Bum, bum, bum. And now we can flash to completion. Okay, so it's allegedly done what it said it was going to do. We're going to take a look soon to see if that was real. So 3 calls, all to GPT 5.2. The DMs created. Hey Mansell, saw your YouTube walkthroughs on AI strategy and adoption. A lot of teams talk AI, but they have a real blocker, is messy handoffs and unclear owners. I made a quick operational health snapshot. 5 questions to spot workflow gaps. Want it? So it did a good job at doing what it needed to do. Normally this would then go into HeyReach and automate my entire LinkedIn outreach, but we stopped it over here so that we can just get a view at our Helicone dashboard. Okay, so let's hit refresh on our dashboard and see if it actually did anything. Come on, load. Okay, what have we got here? We got OpenAI. Yeah, this looks new. There's Perplexity. I didn't have that in there before. So this thing figured out how to do Perplexity, even though it's not as straightforward as the OpenAI node, which is pretty cool. We can see here our little gap if we zoom in, success 5. Cool, so hopefully by now you've seen how easily you can set up something for your clients or even for yourself in your workflows to see how much something costs. For the most part, this dashboard is pretty self-explanatory. It's got things like the average cost, the average prompt tokens, how much time it takes to run, the latency and stuff like that. But the cool thing for you as someone who's building, before you quote someone for whatever it is you're making for them, they're going to want to understand how much this thing costs. For instance, if I was selling this sales outreach tool to someone, this entire agentic workflow that I've built, I would want to factor in the cost per lead. Because if my system costs $100 for one lead, obviously that's not realistic, but let's just say it was something crazy, it would be unrealistic for the client to choose my custom system over something like Clay. Everyone claims that Clay is super expensive, but if you use your own API tokens, it's actually much cheaper. So the point being, if you want to build your own sales tool, what is your cost per lead? And this thing would help you do that. But there's far more that we can actually learn from this system. So say we're looking at a business and we've now implemented this into their business. They have a whole team using a whole bunch of different workflows. They have a few technical people who are managing their environment and doing a whole bunch of things. This little dashboard on the right-hand side here is really interesting to look at because it shows you the top models by requests. Now, if we see a whole bunch of requests for GPT 5.1, you could think to yourself, okay, so that's 289 requests for this. Maybe you should dive into this to see what prompt is actually behind this, and then ask yourself, does that prompt require such a strong model? Which means, okay, if not, we could be saving a ton of money. We could be saving a ton on speed. Could we make the prompt more efficient? The point being is that if there are outliers where the one prompt is so much further ahead in terms of how many times it's used as opposed to the other ones, you could ask yourself why. Now, obviously for older models like this, you shouldn't even really be seeing these anymore because these are massively inefficient. And this is probably just some leftovers from something I ran a while ago. But it's super important to understand these because if you can figure out why something is running and why it's running so many times, then you can dive further down into adjusting the costs for your platform, optimizing your platform, and also reducing any security risks. Because if we scroll down here, we can actually see some interesting stuff. So you have scores which pretty much show you how your prompts are behaving. If I had something set up in here, I would have seen a score. But equally, threats are super important because it's going to tell you if there are any malicious things passing through your system or anything that really shouldn't be there that could be seen as a threat to the business or something that it's going through. Again, these are things that you would set up. For the most part, ideally, you would want guardrails set up before you implement something at a client site. So your workflow that you build or the agent that you introduce should have something that removes PII or something like that before it actually happens. But if it doesn't, this thing would be able to detect it, in which case you would know. So again, the whole point of this is to avoid your client calling you and saying, something is broken, why did this happen and why did I find out about it 3 weeks later? Or, oh my God, we just sent a whole bunch of personal data, credit card information, whatever, into a system that it shouldn't have gone into. Why didn't we know about it? This thing would have told you about it so that you can act beforehand. But then what we can do as well is we can come down to here and see some pretty cool things like rate limits. So something that I didn't know when I was originally running my system is that I was hitting an API limit consistently. I was getting the 429 error from one of my OpenAI models every single time I was running my workflow, but then randomly some workflows would actually do the thing that it was supposed to do. So if we look here, you can see exactly when something ran, the status, which is 429 error. You can show the provider, it shows the request that was made, and we can actually have a look at the entire JSON text if we need to then analyze it further. You could put this into another AI system to set up an alerting mechanism. If it sees 429, it does this thing, reads why it happened, and then you could even automate the repair. Maybe it tops up your API credits or something like that, whatever the hell the problem was. The point is that the more you explore this, the more opportunities you have for automation, but the more opportunities you have to protect your image and also upsell stuff, guys. That's why we're here. Because the last thing that we want, if you set up a sales system for someone and it ends up trying to sell microwaves to a C-level person who's in cybersecurity, it's not really doing what you were supposed to do. This thing would be able to tell you if any of that drift actually exists because you could set up specific things to look for in whatever is being run. If we come on down to the alerts tab, I don't have any set up, but if we wanted to create an alert, you can see how easily we could create an alert, and it can send things to Slack channels, it can send to Telegram, whatever you want it to do, so that people get notified ahead of time. For instance, if I had an alert set up for this 429 limit, my workflow wouldn't have failed a whole bunch of times, and I would have known, okay, this has been failing for almost 2 weeks, 429. I would have found out about it immediately. But then also, if something happens where you have massive spikes in latency, or you have massive spikes in costs, you can set up alerts for that too. So if your workflow generally costs 20 cents, but then all of a sudden it jumps up to 80 cents, you would want to be told about that so you can go and fix it. And that's exactly what this would do. And again, it protects you, it protects the client. Same thing with latency, 97% latency, we don't really want that. The whole point of this dashboard is that you want low latency, you want low error rate, and you want really good throughput, and you want to keep your costs down as well. So essentially having a efficient system that is also cost effective. But that's it, guys. It's not really rocket science. There is obviously a whole other bunch of stuff you can do with these tools, which I'm not going to get into in this video. I will save it for another one. But things like caching is super important because you can save a lot of tokens just by caching stuff that's frequently used. I'll cover that, and I'll cover evals in another video. And perhaps we'll explore some of these other tools to see how you can use them in your environment as well for any of the clients that you're delivering stuff to. But please, if you are building something now, it is so simple to do this, and there are so many great ways for you to make extra money just by doing something so simple. But if this video was helpful, please leave some comments below and a like. Otherwise, check the videos on the screen now. They're definitely going to help you on your journey Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next one, and thanks for watching.